Why Reading Matters for Your English Journey. Introduction. Hello everyone and welcome back to LinguaSync. I'm your host, Jamie Walker, and today's episode is called Why Reading Matters for Your English Journey. Now, I know some of you might be thinking, reading? Isn't that boring? But trust me, reading is not only exciting, it is also one of the most powerful ways to improve your English. It is more than just looking at words on a page. Reading is like entering a new world, full of new words, expressions, and ideas that slowly shape the way you speak. By the end of this episode, you'll see that reading is not only about books. It's about training your brain to think in English, building vocabulary naturally, and gaining confidence in conversations. So, stay with me until the very end. This could change the way you learn English forever. Part 1. Reading as a gateway. Reading is much more than looking at words on a page. It opens a door to new ideas, new cultures, and new ways of thinking. Every book, article, or story you read takes you on a journey that adds something valuable to your English. You are not just reading sentences, you are stepping into a world that teaches you how language works in real life. Think of reading as traveling without leaving your chair. Through stories, you can visit different countries, experience new traditions, and meet characters who speak in natural English. This gives you exposure to phrases and expressions you may not find in textbooks. The more you read, the more comfortable you become with how English is really used by native speakers. Another powerful benefit of reading is that it teaches you in a way that feels natural. Instead of memorizing long lists of words or grammar rules, you learn through context. When you see a phrase in a story, your brain connects it to an image, an emotion, or a situation. This connection makes it easier to remember and to use later in your own conversations. Reading also builds your vocabulary in a meaningful way. For example, if you read a story about a child exploring a forest, you will meet words like wild, adventure, mysterious, and explore. These words are not random. They are tied to feelings and images that stay in your memory. Later, when you want to share your own experiences, these words come back naturally and make your speech richer. Finally, reading makes English feel less like a subject and more like a living experience. Every page you turn adds to your confidence because you are actively engaging with the language. It feels enjoyable rather than forced, and that enjoyment keeps you motivated. Over time, reading becomes not only a tool for learning, but also a habit that shapes the way you think and speak in English. Part 2. Grammar without rules. One of the most surprising things about reading is that it teaches grammar without the stress of memorizing rules. Instead of sitting with a grammar chart and trying to remember tenses, you simply see them being used in real sentences. When you read a story, your brain naturally notices how words are connected and how sentences are built. Over time, these patterns become familiar, and you start to use them in your own speech without even thinking about it. For example, if you read the sentence, "She was walking quickly because she was late," your brain sees how the past continuous tense is used. You don't need to stop and say, "This is past continuous, subject plus was plus verbing." Your brain just absorbs the structure because you've seen it in context. Later, when you want to talk about something in the past, the same structure comes back to you naturally. This is why reading feels lighter than traditional grammar study. It shows you grammar in action rather than in theory. Think of it like learning to dance. You can read about the steps, or you can watch someone dance and follow along. Reading gives you that watch and follow experience, where you learn by example, not by memorizing rules. The more you read, the stronger these grammar patterns become in your memory. You begin to notice how native speakers use contractions like I'm instead of I am, or gonna instead of going to. These small details are difficult to learn from a textbook, but they are easy to catch when you see them repeated in stories or conversations on the page. They shape your ear and your tongue at the same time. In the end, reading turns grammar into something natural and automatic. You stop worrying about, is this correct? Because you've already seen so many examples of correct usage. You don't need to study rules to feel the rhythm of English. You just need to keep reading. The sentences you read today will become the sentences you say tomorrow. And the more you expose yourself to written English, the more natural your speaking will sound. Part 3. Building vocabulary like a treasure chest. Reading is one of the most natural ways to grow your vocabulary. Unlike word lists, which often feel dry and mechanical, reading shows you words in action. Each time you read a new story, article, or blog, you encounter fresh vocabulary that is connected to context. This makes the words easier to understand and much easier to remember. Think of your vocabulary like a treasure chest. Every time you read, you are collecting new treasures, words and expressions that you can later use in conversation. If you read about a jungle, you might discover words like explore, mystery, wild, or adventure. These words are not just symbols on a page. They carry meaning, emotion, and pictures that stay in your mind. The beauty of learning words through reading is that they do not stay isolated. They come alive in sentences that show you how to use them correctly. For example, instead of only memorizing the word dashed, you might read, "The little dog dashed across the yard." Now you not only know the meaning, ran quickly, but you also know how to place it naturally in a sentence. This kind of vocabulary learning is more powerful than rote memorization. When you face real conversations, the words you have seen in stories return to you almost automatically. Instead of struggling to find words, you will have a store of expressive terms ready to use. You are no longer limited to saying, "It was fun." You can say, "It was an amazing adventure," which makes your speech richer and more engaging. Over time, these treasures build a strong foundation for your English. With every book, article, or comic you read, you add more tools to your language toolkit. And the best part is that you are not forcing yourself to memorize, you are simply enjoying the act of reading. The words you gather along the way will make your English sound more natural, colorful, and confident. Part 4. Thinking and listening in English. One of the biggest challenges for English learners is the habit of translating. Many people think in their native language first, then try to find the English words, and finally speak. This process is slow and often frustrating. Reading helps break that habit by training your brain to think directly in English. When you are absorbed in a story, your focus is on the meaning, not on translation. Imagine reading a short story about a boy who loves soccer. At first, you may look at every word carefully, but soon you find yourself following the story naturally, picturing the game in your mind. Without realizing it, you stop translating word by word. Your brain begins to connect English words directly with ideas and images, making the language feel more natural. This shift is powerful because it changes the ways you communicate. Instead of pausing to translate sentences, you begin to respond more quickly in English. Reading trains your mind to recognize common phrases, structures, and expressions so that they come to you automatically. The more you read, the more natural it feels to think in English during everyday situations. Reading also strengthens your listening skills, even though it seems unrelated. When you read often, your brain becomes familiar with how English words and sentences look. Later, when you hear those same words spoken in a conversation, your brain recognizes them more quickly. It's similar to hearing a song many times. At first, it sounds unclear, but soon you can catch every lyric and rhythm. This connection between reading and listening makes conversations much easier. You begin to recognize expressions faster and understand speakers without as much effort. Your ears and your eyes work together, helping you feel more confident when listening to movies, podcasts, or even friends. Reading in this way is not just practice for your eyes, it's training for your whole communication system. Part 5. Reading as a daily habit. One of the most effective ways to improve your English is to make reading a part of your daily routine. You don't need hours and hours every day. Even 10 to 15 minutes of reading can make a noticeable difference over time. The key is not the length of practice, but the consistency. Small steps, repeated daily, bring steady growth. Think about how habits are built. Just like brushing your teeth or drinking water in the morning, reading can become a natural part of your day. If you read at the same time each day, maybe in the morning with coffee, during lunch, or before bed, it starts to feel automatic. Soon, you won't have to remind yourself to read. It will simply be something you do. Choosing the right materials is also very important. If you pick books or articles that are too difficult, you may feel frustrated. Instead, start with simple and enjoyable content: children's books, comics, blogs, or short news articles. When you enjoy what you are reading, you are more likely to continue, and learning happens without pressure. Over time, this habit builds a strong foundation for your English. Each page adds new words, new sentence patterns, and new ideas to your knowledge. Think of it as adding ingredients to a meal. Each ingredient makes the dish richer and tastier. In the same way, every small reading session makes your English more colorful and expressive. The most important part is to stay consistent. Reading a little every day is more powerful than reading for 2 hours once a week. By keeping the habit small and enjoyable, you're more likely to stick with it. Little by little, you will notice that English feels easier, conversations feel smoother, and your confidence grows naturally. Reading daily is like planting seeds. Over time, they grow into a strong garden of language. Part 6. Confidence through reading. Confidence is often the biggest barrier for English learners. Many people know grammar rules and vocabulary, but when it comes time to speak, fear takes over. They worry about making mistakes or being judged, and that worry keeps them quiet. Reading can help overcome this fear because it gives you a strong foundation of words, patterns, and expressions that you can trust. When you read often, you see how sentences are built in real situations. You notice how people express emotions, how they ask questions, and how they respond. This exposure helps you feel more prepared when you need to speak. Instead of wondering, "How do I say this?" you already have examples stored in your mind from the texts you have read. Reading also introduces you to natural, everyday English that is not always taught in classrooms. For example, a textbook might show you, "Hello, how are you?" But in a story, you might see, "Hey, what's up?" or "How's it going?" These are the phrases people actually use in real life. When you read them many times, you feel more confident using them in your own conversations. Another benefit is that reading gives you something interesting to share. Imagine reading an article about a chef in a famous restaurant. The next time you talk about food, you can say, "I read about this amazing chef who creates unique dishes." Suddenly, you are not just repeating classroom sentences, you are sharing knowledge and stories. This makes your conversations richer and helps you feel proud of what you can say. Finally, reading out loud is a simple but powerful way to boost confidence. By saying sentences from a book or article, you train your mouth and your voice while practicing pronunciation. At first, it may feel strange, but with time, it feels natural, almost like having a conversation with yourself. The more you do this, the more comfortable you will feel speaking in front of others. Reading gives you both the language and the courage to use it. Part 7. Creativity and personal voice. Reading is not only about learning words and grammar, it also helps you shape your own voice in English. Every author has a unique way of expressing ideas, and when you read different texts, you are exposed to these different styles. Some writers use humor, some focus on emotions, and others love to describe details.
Over time, you naturally borrow from these styles and develop a way of speaking that feels personal and authentic. This process gives you freedom in how you use English. Instead of sounding like you are repeating from a textbook, you begin to sound more like yourself. For example, if you enjoy an author who writes with humor, you might find yourself using light and funny expressions. If you enjoy descriptive stories, you may start adding more details when you talk. Reading gives you the tools to shape your English so it matches your personality. Another benefit is that reading sparks creativity. The ideas you discover in books, articles, or blogs can inspire you to think in new ways. You may read about science, travel, art, or history, and suddenly you have fresh topics to discuss with others. This not only improves your English, but also makes you a more interesting conversation partner. People enjoy talking with someone who brings new ideas and perspectives. Reading also helps you connect English with your imagination. When you picture scenes, characters, or events from a story, you are practicing the skill of visual thinking in English. This skill makes your conversations more colorful because you can describe things more clearly. Instead of saying, "It was nice," you might say, "It felt like standing under a sky full of bright stars." This level of detail comes from the creative input that reading provides. In the end, reading helps you do more than just communicate. It helps you express who you are. Your personal style in English becomes a reflection of your interests, your sense of humor, and your creativity. The more you read, the more confident you become in expressing yourself in a way that feels unique and natural. Through reading, you're not only learning a language, you're also building your own voice in it.
Final thoughts. As we come to the end of today's episode, I want you to remember this simple truth. Reading is not just an activity, it is a journey. Every page you read brings new words, new ideas, and new expressions into your life. It allows you to travel to different places, meet new characters, and explore cultures, all without leaving your chair. More importantly, it gives you the confidence to express yourself in English with clarity and personality. Now, the most important step is to turn this knowledge into action. Reading only helps if you make it part of your daily life. You don't need to spend hours. Even 10 minutes a day can make a real difference. Pick something you enjoy, maybe a short story, a blog, a comic, or even a magazine article, and read it with curiosity. The more you enjoy the material, the easier it will be to stay consistent and to build reading into your routine. Before we close, I'd love to hear from you. Go to the comments section and write this simple promise. I will read in English every day. Share what kind of reading you enjoy, whether it's stories, news, or comics, so we can inspire each other as a community. Remember, your journey in English is not about perfection. It's about building habits that make you feel confident and comfortable. Thank you for joining me on LinguaSync, and I look forward to meeting you again in the next episode.